The gentleman from Oklahoma, Chairman Coles, recognized.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's very hard for me to question my friend when he's busy trying to get extra money from my committee to spend on something that we both agree on. But let me start out by saying, number one, I appreciate the manner in which you both have worked together and both have worked through the process, because there have been concerns, and you've really gone the extra mile, Mr. Chairman, and to try and work with people, and that is much noted and appreciated on my committee, certainly. And frankly, it's pretty typical of both your styles anyway, so thank you very much. I've got 3 or 4 concerns. I couldn't agree with you more about trying to spend more money at NIH. And as a matter of fact, we do have a rare bipartisan moment here, not just in your bill, but really across the political spectrum. The president proposed $1 billion additional, through the regular appropriations process this year. We did a little better than that in the Republican bill at 1.1. Our former colleague and friend Roy Blunt has gone to 2 in the Senate bill. So it's pretty clear to me that we're going to move money this way. Our challenge has been exactly one that you try to address here, that is, it's not good enough to do it for 1 year. You really need sustained progress and predictable progress. That's been hard to achieve since we've had the BCA. When you're only increasing all of discretionary spending by $1 billion or $2 billion on $1 trillion, but the idea that you can plan increases moving forward is good. So again, I know some of my friends have concerns about that. I do too, in terms of just shifting mandatory into discretionary spending. But the basic idea of being able to plan down the road is a good idea, and it's a really important one, I think. And so I think you're commended there. I do worry a little bit, and let me ask you this question. I'm going to get back to the mandatories. We just had an experience with, and this won't happen on my watch. This will not be a problem I have to face, but it'll be a problem my successor has to face. When the Affordable Health Care Act was passed, there was a substantial investment made for community health centers, and about 5 years worth of funding out of mandatory. All that was coming to an end. If we hadn't had the doc fix this year, that would have ended. It would have been a $2 billion hit. I can tell you, I had people coming to me, and there was no way in the Labor H budget we were going to be able to find $2 billion to replace this. So I worry a little bit about this in regard to this bill. At some point, because it does sunset, as you say, we're going to face this dilemma. It's either going to end, and all of a sudden, to sustain rate, you're going to have to find another $2 billion, or it's going to just simply we'll just start debt financing it, because these programs will be popular. So how would you address that? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know what the next couple Congresses down the road will do. One of the things that we did in this bill was we provided a little more control to the director of the NIH, so that he or she in the future will be maybe a more responsible role in terms of what they actually decide on. Dr. Collins will be in a stronger position if this bill is signed into law than the authorities that he has today, and therefore, but I'm sure that our committee will continue to have oversight in terms of what they're doing. One of the things we do in this bill, of course, is reauthorize the bill, and Joe Barton did a great job when we reauthorized this the last time around. But I would like to think that 5 years from now, if this is successful, and if that Congress decides to move forward, that they would follow on the same model that we did here, that they'll marry up dollar for dollar savings, in this case, really over 20 years, maybe twice as much savings is what's going to be spent, that they'd follow that same model. But, I don't know what, I have no clue what they'll do, but we do. The point that we made was that we sunset it, and that certainty, as we talk to Dr. Collins and others, they're very excited about where this is going to take us in terms of the potential for cures on the diseases that impact all of our constituents.
And let me just add, too, as we all know, biomedical research doesn't happen just by the appropriations year. And so having a 5-year known quantity for researchers is going to be extremely important for getting these advances, for getting the grant applications and getting the advances. And I think that the chairman and I both think that assuming that we really start to get research and advances, then if it's really working, then we can come back in 5 years, find the appropriate offsets, whatever we need, and reauthorize the program. An example I frequently give to people when they ask this question, the Special Diabetes Fund. Some of you were here when we did the Special Diabetes Fund. I'm the co-chair of the Diabetes Caucus. And we did the Special Diabetes Fund in 1999, and it was Newt Gingrich and myself. And we had $2 billion over 10 years for funding for type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes affecting American Indian populations in 1999. And so when the 10th year approached in 2009, people realized how important that fund was and how much great research had come and where it was going. We reauthorized it at that time, and now, just in the SGR bill that we just passed, there's another 2-year reauthorization for the Special Diabetes
That's exactly
Fund.
what concerns me. That's exactly what I worry about. Because we're basically taking mandatory, look, our budget is unbalanced by mandatory spending. You give appropriators a number, they live within the number. They've actually cut discretionary spending. We're spending about $150 billion a year less in the discretionary accounts than we were. What drives the debt is mandatory spending. So if we're going to make mandatory savings and we're running a huge deficit on the mandatory side of the budget, which we are, and it'll get worse, then why are we redirecting that money, to the discretionary side? Those savings ought to be captured, the classic, argument would be they ought to be captured to deal with the deficit that mandatory programs are created.
Well, remember, we actually identified more savings than are being spent. So, in fact, the deficit will be going down.
But that assumes, again, we don't do what we did with community health care centers. That assumes that the program does sunset in 5 years. I mean, those savings only pay for it in 10 if you stop spending in 5. And if you keep spending, and look, I'm trying to be, because I want to get there. Because I think the policy in this bill is really good. I think the investments are really important. And I think the potential savings that you point out are real. And I think they need to happen. But this idea of funding the discretionary side of the budget with mandatory spending, it's really the road in the wrong direction in terms of getting to the fiscal health of the country, unless you're going to get some breakthrough that fundamentally change the arc of Alzheimer's.
And, let me echo what Fred has said, which is if in 5 years we don't want to reauthorize it, then we won't. But in the meantime, we think we will have those savings. And I must say, Dr. Burgess can talk to us about the bill that we're working on together to look at the way we score, these biomedical
Not to be skeptical, but I guarantee you, 5 years ago when we were funding community health care centers, a lot of people said, well, we'll make this investment and they'll stop. I know what the political pressure is. And that's a good investment. Look, I don't really believe we'll stop doing this in 5 years. I have a real hard time believing that. We can, but I know what a $2 billion hole looks like in what's now a $31 billion agency that's really focused on really important stuff. So, one of the things I do like about what you did, and so I'm sort of going back and forth in my own argument. Initially you were just going to put the money there, and we still had to live under the budget caps, which meant you got to add $2 billion in research, and I got to go whack $2 billion out of education or someplace else in the jurisdiction. So you figured out a way to get us around that, which I'm grateful for. Because, we would have just had to cut something else. It wouldn't have made that much difference. This is now value-added money. What I do worry about, and I'm not sure you can really answer the question. It's not even fair to ask it, but, well, it is fair to ask it because we're going to have to all face it in 5 years. Does this then become permanent mandatory spending in the discretionary side of the budget? I don't know that. I don't think the community health care example, and I was very supportive of what we did in the doc fix there. Let me say that. So I was happy to vote for it. But that suggests to me the pressure behind these things mounts. It doesn't go away.
Well, I would say that, there was another case where we fast-forwarded, put together appropriations on the pandemic drug bill, after 9/11, that was made mandatory, and in fact, that moved to the discretionary side of things.
Well, yeah, I know. I get to deal with that. It's not real helpful.
Yeah.
I mean, because then, you have your discretionary spending taken up. So it's a challenge. It really is going to create, at some point, a real challenge either for the Congress in terms of we're going to continue down the road of mandatory spending for discretionary projects, or for whoever my successor is that's sitting there all of a sudden has to find either cut NIH by $2 billion, which nobody wants to do, or cut something else, or, to try and maintain that. So, and that puts you, all the choices in here, and I will tell you this is a hard-nosed Republican. They're particularly tough choices for Democrats usually, because everything in the labor age budget is, generally pretty popular with most Democrats. Republicans can actually, there's a reason why we're able to add $1.1 billion. There's more of these programs we have questions about than some of my Democratic colleagues do. But it is a real difficult challenge if 5 years from now somebody's sitting there saying, where do I find the next $2 billion, or how do I take it out of NIH's hide? Because all the very good things you're talking about, we do need to increase the number of research grants out there. No question about it. We do have people leaving the profession because they can't, they don't just get all these degrees to go teach. They want to research. They want to do cutting edge science, and we're not funding nearly enough of it. And so, I mean, we're going to make that commitment one way or other in the next few years. And this could be a real keystone in it. So I'm not being critical. I'm just asking the same question some of my colleagues are asking.
And we thank you for that. And I also want to just commend again Hal Rogers. We worked with for 2 months to make sure that we had, so you didn't have to take it out of something else.
Oh, I know. I was screaming at him in
I know.
another
Well,
room.
that's good. Maybe we should have gone to you first. Maybe it would have been anyway. But too, let me just say for the FDA. I mean, one of the things that we heard from the pharmaceutical companies. Let's take advantage of the genome model, biomarkers. The FDA, didn't have all the people there to do the work that was going to get done. Maybe 30% of them. That's changing. Janet Woodcock, who you know well, she's done a good job at looking and identifying that as a source to try and get it moving forward, and we're going to be much better off because of it.
Let me suggest a couple things, and then Chairman's been very generous with the time, and I know there'll be a lot of questions, because this is genuinely an important piece of legislation. I mean, really important. In a perfect world, the way to deal with this would be simply to focus on the larger entitlement picture and come to a larger budget agreement. It is frustrating if you're an appropriator, because we've taken a lot of cuts in the last few years, and that's the job. But we haven't seen out of Ways and Means or E&C much in the way of entitlement reform, which is where 70% of the money's at. And I still hope this year we have a larger budget deal, somewhat like the doc fix, where we have some entitlement reform in terms of relief for discretionary spending that both sides agree is appropriate. Why not take that tack? Are we by doing this, are we sort of putting off dealing with that problem, because sooner or later we're going to have to confront it?
I hope not, and that's I agree with you on the larger context, but this is just a very small piece. I don't think this delays or impedes the progress of that. I think that ultimately that discussion happens and occurs. I think this is $2 billion out of what, $3 trillion. I mean, I think it's not gonna stop that progress that needs to be made.
I hope you're right, and I think we've avoided that discussion the last couple of years for a variety of reasons. I actually think the new president, whoever it is, whatever party, is going to be confronted. You read the CBO reports; it's pretty. I mean, the budget deficit starts going back up pretty dramatically right about the end of this president's term, and when the new one comes in. And so in that 4 years, I mean, we'll be back to $1 trillion annual deficits if we don't have some serious entitlement reform. To end on a positive note, the thing that really does excite me the most about this, and Dr. Harris said it very well, I thought, this morning in our conference, and I know Dr. Burgess would know, the potential. This is one of those things you spend a little bit and it could really pay off big. And it's clearly pay off big in terms of the quality of life And that's the most important thing, to be able to extend it and enrich it for individual Americans, regardless of their circumstances or background. But if you just want to put your green eye shades on it, there is a real chance here to have a game changer in the next few years. And sometimes you just have to do that. You have to take the risk. So I want to thank you, number one, for the excellent policy in this. This is one of the things appropriators complain a lot about, is when will the authorizers committee ever reauthorize this stuff? So, we get caught a lot of time funding, the things that haven't been reauthorized in 20 or 30 years. You guys did a great job in reauthorizing this. And it's also one of the things that justifies the additional investment, to be quite frank. And you came together, you worked through the problems, and again, whatever questions I have, I am very cognizant of how hard you guys both worked with our committee and with other people that had concerns to get something that was fiscally responsible, that restricted jurisdictional lines and allowed us to do what we do and you to do what you do, and not step in or sort of be in one another's garden, so to speak. So I think you're both to really be commended for this, and I appreciate it very much, Chairman.
Well, thank you. And I just, it has been a team. There were a number of times back in February and March where literally the Democratic and Republican staff were meeting in one of our small offices, and we had the former director of the FDA and others, and literally they were going through the notebook page by page. Here's what you got right. Here's how you can tweak it. Here's how you can make this a little bit better. We put out a lot of discussion drafts, and we wanted to listen to the experts for them to tell us what's right, what's wrong, and they really helped us big.
Well, in the annals of Congress, we all like to, and we all beat up on the institution far too much when we should. This has actually been a pretty good year for us. I mean, the doc fix was a huge bipartisan accomplishment. Human traffic, a huge bipartisan accomplishment. This could be, at least that. And the fact that in a contentious time, you and Mr. Jett have managed to work together and bring so many competing groups together. Heavens, if we can't be united around something like this, I'm not sure what we can unite about. So you're to be commended. Maybe we'll look back in January over what was a very good year. And if that happens, because we actually arrive at some of these larger agreements, I have no doubt this will be a pretty big, important piece in that story. So, yield back, Mr. Chairman.